What is up, my friends and fellow Busybees? Today marks a very exciting milestone as it has officially been 1 full year since the birth of Busybee Refinishing with MelDidItHerself, which is nuts. I am so thankful to every single one of you who shows up here week after week to spend time with me, and honestly, doing the podcast is my favorite part of the week. Don't tell Instagram. Thinking up ideas and getting input from you guys, laying out the content, sitting down to record, and I don't even mind the editing process because it can be pretty therapeutic and satisfying once you really get into the zone. I have been able to meet so many new people since beginning this podcast from literally all over the world. I can see the insights on the back end of the hosting platform that I use, and listen to this. We have people listening in from Canada, the US, Australia, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, New Zealand, Israel, Ireland, Belgium, South Africa, Mexico, Colombia, Estonia, Serbia, France, India, Austria, Brazil, Bulgaria, Indonesia, Puerto Rico, Turkey, Romania, Italy, Honduras, Slovakia, and Greece. That's fucking nuts, guys. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for being here. Truly, it means so much to me that you tune in and are interested in learning more about the world of furniture makeovers and running a furniture upcycling business. I don't take it for granted. Although this past year has been an absolute whirlwind filled with so much stuff and has definitely not felt like it was 365 days long, I sat down and started thinking about my experience in starting, running, and growing the podcast over this year, and I have 6 lessons learned that I wanted to share with you here today. Whether you're interested in starting a podcast of your own one day or not, these are lessons that I think would be useful to take with you into life, in whatever venture you decide to pursue, and I think they're really important to reflect on and take time to acknowledge and appreciate, especially as I move into year 2 of the podcast and everything that will follow with that. Who knows what happens? And could I first ask one tiny little favor of you before we get to the good stuff? If you haven't yet left a rating and or a review for the podcast on the podcast player that you're listening on, would you mind just opening it up really quickly and leaving one right now? This is a way to add a layer of legitimacy to the podcast and helps intrigue people who are searching for new podcasts to listen to by seeing that it's backed by lots of reviews of people who listen in and have great things to say about it. It's also some positive feedback that I can use as testimonials for when I'm approaching potential sponsors to be able to get support to continue this project that I love so much. So if you would be willing to hop over and leave one, it would mean so much to me. Thank you in advance to those who do. Alright, so when I first decided I was going to start a podcast, it was sort of on a whim, but I did a bit of research as well before deciding ultimately to pull the trigger and really pursue it. It was during a weekend that my husband was away on a golf trip with his friends, and we didn't have our puppy Yukon yet, so that meant that I had a lot of free time in my day to do whatever I wanted. Ah, the glory days. This dog fills up my heart like I could never imagine, but what I wouldn't give to go back and relive those carefree days of waking up whenever I wanted, not having to schedule my day around walks and eating and poop times and dealing with the seemingly never-ending teething stage. Anyways, I digress, but goddamn was that nice. So during that time, I was getting closer and closer to the point of being ready to pull the trigger and go full-time in the business. I think it was just a couple weeks after this that I decided to give my notice to my employer. And so I was thinking a lot more about big picture stuff for the business. I remember I had downloaded a bunch of podcast episodes from some of the new marketing gurus I had recently discovered, like Amy Porterfield, John Lee Dumas, and Jenna Kutcher. If you're looking for marketing podcasts, they have a ton of information-packed episodes if you want to check them out. You may already know about them, they're very large podcasts. And in one episode of Jenna Kutcher's Gold Digger podcast, she was discussing her backstory of when she decided to start a podcast and what went into it and some of the programs and tech that she used for it. The episode had a call to action of some sort for a webinar she had on Evergreen, presumably to sell you a digital course on how to start a podcast. But I decided to enroll in that webinar to see what additional tips she shared there because I had been intrigued by the podcast episode and info shared over there. So the following morning, I got up, I waited for the start time, I grabbed a big cup of coffee, snuggled up in a fuzzy blanket on the couch, and grabbed my notebook and wrote out about 2 pages of notes, writing down anything that seemed like useful tidbits or questions that came up in my mind that she didn't answer as things to research later. Once it was over, I knew I was interested in the concept and did some additional research to fill in those missing blanks, do a market scan to see how many other furniture painting and refinishing podcasts were out there. Spoiler alert, not that many at all. And really, there was only one that was popular. And then I did a search on my podcast player for other episodes that people had made about podcasting and sharing their tips and lessons learned. I downloaded a bunch, went on a 2-hour walk around my area with my AirPods in and podcasts playing in my ears, and by the time I made it home, had made the decision in my head that I was going to start a podcast. Now that might seem like a really quick decision to make, but that was intentional. Indecision is my middle name. Not actually. It's actually Lynn, named after my paternal grandmother. Thanks for asking. And so as I have gotten into business and made the decision to try and grow it and get intentional with pursuing it, one of the promises I had made to myself was that I wasn't going to overthink and sit on decisions for too long. I would evaluate the options, do some research, but not get too bogged down in a rabbit hole doing it because Google is endless. And then I would make the decision that I could feel in my bones I was leaning towards. I would give it a certain amount of time of actively pursuing that decision wholeheartedly, and then I would reevaluate how I was enjoying it, if it was working in the way that I thought it would, and then either continue doing what I was doing, make some changes, and then keep going, or decide to stop and go in another direction. Allowing myself that freedom to not feel obligated to stick with it if it felt like I was trying to swim against the current made me just really excited to give it a try, give it my all, but not allow myself to feel too tied to it if it wasn't for me. If you are someone that often feels that paralysis by analysis and can get stuck in decision-making concrete, unable to decide one way or the other, I highly recommend trying to develop this mindset and seeing if it works for you. It's made a big difference in my life. One thing I was aware of and very weary of when I started, though, was if anyone would actually listen in. Although there wasn't a ton of podcasts talking about what I wanted to talk about, there is still a lot of options for what to listen to out there in general, and so it was easy to feel like a piece of sand in the ocean. As of January 2023, there were 3.02 million podcasts out there. However, if you then look only at active podcasts, which is kind of hard to define, but in the research I found, they defined it as one that released at least one episode throughout 2022. That 3.02 million goes down to only 500,000 podcasts. In comparison, the odds seem not too shabby. Which leads me to my first lesson learned. There is an audience out there for everyone in the podcasting space. Someone is always willing to listen to what you have to say. Which is great. Thanks for being here again. Even if there is another person talking about the exact same topic or topics that you decide to focus your podcast on, they will still be 2 completely different shows because you are you and they are them. You bring your own unique experiences, opinions, takes on things, styles of thinking and talking and analyzing, which makes you uniquely you. So no matter what you say, no matter what direction you decide to take it, someone is out there that is willing to listen to you and is interested in hearing what you have to say, period. Hard stop. So remember that, even if we broaden it past the context of podcasts, on social media, in your email marketing, if you want to write a book, if you want to host seminars or a TED Talk, or whatever it may be, there is an audience out there that wants to hear what you have to say. So don't let your fear of failure or your lack of self-confidence hold you back because you're scared of the potential of seeing that number be 0 for a little while before people start to discover it and get hooked. All it takes is persistence and being true to you. The second lesson learned is that you need to just start. Before you feel ready, before it feels like everything is set up perfectly how you want it to be in its end form, before everything is polished and pristine. Because there's no such thing as being completely ready, and you're never going to feel like you've got it all figured out. Once you hit the point of feeling slightly more excited than you are afraid, that's when you hit the ground running. I knew that I didn't know everything about sound engineering and search engine optimization and hosting and growing a podcast when I first started. But I started with learning the basics of how to get it up and running. I researched people's lessons learned to hopefully avoid the growing pains that they had to deal with. I made sure I had enough ideas to last for a little while for podcast topics, while I knew that things would be slower moving because I was still learning, and then I went for it. I didn't have the perfect podcast cover art. My description wasn't as search engine optimized as it is now. I didn't have a theme introduction song. I still don't even have that. I wasn't as comfortable with being so upfront and personal, recording my raw voice for the world to hear, but I went for it anyway. And then over time, I fine-tuned as I went on. I dedicated time to learning more and seeking out more resources to learn from and listening to podcast coaches. In time, I have also gotten more comfortable with it simply due to the repeated exposure to it. It helps. It makes it less scary and weird to talk into the ether and know that people from all over the world might be listening or might not be listening. And I have also developed systems and workflows and automations that have made it quicker and easier to plan, record, edit, put together, schedule, and market each episode so that I can spend less and less time every week having to dedicate to it. But it took me time to get there. Rome wasn't built in a day, my friends, and I still work hard every day to do better and learn more. So what I'm doing today will likely look different from when I film a similar episode another year from now and talk about what I learned during year 2. And what a great way to be able to share these things with you as I mess things up along the way so that you can skip them should you ever decide you'd like to pursue making a podcast of your own one day and get inspired from me in the way that Jenna's podcast inspired me to start my own. My third lesson learned was that it's actually way easier than you would probably think to start and create a podcast and maintain it consistently. Granted, I do my podcast as audio only, while some people integrate a video element, which does add some costs, time, and effort to the mix, which, for the record, is why I decided to keep it audio only. Do you have any idea how long it takes me to do my hair and makeup? Ain't nobody got time for that. But that's the beauty of podcasting. You can do as much or as little as you want, and it will still meet the mark for some people. Would more people watch or listen if I had a video element to this podcast? Maybe, maybe not. But I did a cost-benefit analysis of what would be most sustainable for me long-term, even if things in my business got more busy. And this is what I deemed to work best for me. And so far, so good. So you can determine whatever is best for you too. And that's not to say that eventually I couldn't add in that video element if I wanted to, or if you added it in and determined that you wanted to just stick to audio only, you could go down to that. I feel like people tend to put a lot of expectations on themselves based on what they think people want or think is expected of them. I try to avoid that and just stick to my wants, my needs, my desires, and hope that the right people find me. Life's too short to not do whatever the fuck you want. Remember that. And if starting up your own podcast is something that you have been thinking of and you would love to learn more about what I learned and how to start it, name it, host it, get people to find it, and then market it continually and all that other good stuff, just a really quick shameless plug for a reminder that you can sit down with me one-on-one and learn all of that if you became one of my coaching and consulting clients. I typically market these services as helping you to start or grow your furniture painting and refinishing business or side hustle. However, I am always more than happy to share whatever it is I know and have learned in this space, including about specific projects I've taken on, like starting a podcast. A client I'm currently working with reached out and isn't even in the furniture refinishing space, but just wanted to pick my brain about growing a following on social media and reaching the right people for her services that she sells. And I've been living and breathing social media for well over 3 years now, so I was more than happy to accommodate. So if this is something that interests you in checking out, you can head to meldiditherself.ca/services, and I will leave the link in the show notes. My fourth lesson learned in my first year of podcasting is about the nature of podcasts in general. They are one of the most quickly growing marketing strategies out there right now, if you're listening to this when this is released in 2023. And this wasn't something that I was super aware of at the time that I started. I don't even know that it was that back when I started, but I am now hearing so many chief marketing officers and content entrepreneurs talking about how valuable a platform podcasting is, which is just like a cherry on top of the cake because I already love doing it so much. And I feel like I can really authentically be myself in this medium by just freely talking like this and not having the pressure of a camera on me, a particular time limitation, or feeling the need to make the content mesh well with like a trending sound or something like that on social media. We are seeing larger corporations start to really invest in and promote podcasts and podcasting recently too, which is a great indication of where the market is heading. YouTube now has a specific spot where they highlight podcasts on the platform, which, by the way, YouTube being a video sharing platform, that's pretty impressive. And Spotify recently acquired Anchor, which is a podcast hosting platform. So if they're investing that much money into these kinds of things, then you know they're probably going to be going hard with promoting and pushing this content in the future because they're seeing the value in it. And the reason, from my understanding at least, is that it's such a valuable marketing strategy for businesses because anyone who is a listener of a podcast is usually pretty tuned into that podcast. I know for me, I have my rotation of maybe 5 to 10 podcast shows that I follow and podcast shows. I just sounded like such a boomer. Podcasts that I follow and listen to on the regular. I tune in when they have a new episode, and if I get busy and miss episodes right when they're released, but I see that it's a topic or a guest that I'm really interested in, I'll add them to my episodes and then go back and get caught up later when I have the time to do so. It's also a way to get right into someone's ears and talk directly to a lot of people, and you have a much larger chance of that information and episode ending up being consumed by someone than, say, an Instagram reel that you put out. If you didn't know, the current stats on Instagram is that less than 6% of your following will typically be seeing the content that you put out there, so do with that information what you'd like. Podcasting is also just like a more intimate medium, I feel like, because for me, when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm going about my day-to-day life. It's almost like I'm chit-chatting with like a friend. I'm walking the dog, I'm driving around, I'm cleaning the house, I'm working in the workshop, like I'm doing these day-to-day things with this person essentially by my side in my ears. So it's a kind of a different level of familiarity and trust. Like when people are recommending products and services and stuff that they're promoting and they're people that I've been listening to for years, it feels a lot different to me than somebody's reel popping up periodically and like them talking about those exact same things in that medium, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like there's like a level of connection or like a parasocial relationship maybe is more what it is. But it just feels different with podcasts. I don't know why. My fifth lesson learned in this first year of the podcast is more of a reminder of an important life lesson that I continually learn and relearn over time, which is to just take the road less traveled when you feel called to it. Don't feel the need to do what everybody else is doing because you assume it's the best thing to do or the right thing to do or the most effective thing to do because everybody's doing it. That's like sheep following the herd. If you have an idea that you think you will enjoy, but you don't necessarily see a bunch of other people doing it, just give it a go and see what happens. When you pursue the things that feel right, even when everybody else isn't doing it, things will just feel aligned and effortless for the most part because you stayed true to yourself and your desires. Those are the things that you get excited to wake up to do in the morning and feel like get-to-dos instead of have-to-dos. What a blessing that is to have and to be able to meet awesome new people while doing it and ideally be able to eventually monetize it. #goals. I'm here for it. The sixth and last harsh and ruthless lesson I have learned over the last year is that when you start a podcast, unfortunately, you will just inevitably have to hear the annoying shit you do and say when you talk. Having to listen to your own voice is definitely gross and cringy at first, but I found I got used to that after a while. Although, if ever an episode starts playing on my phone or like a speaker or whatever when somebody else is in the car or in the room with me, I instinctively just go like, ew, stop, and like run to turn it off. It feels like extra icky for some reason if somebody else is hearing it while I'm hearing it simultaneously. But even worse, you find out the weird noises that you make when you inhale, or how nasal you sound saying certain words, or you discover how frequently you add in filler words unbeknownst to you. For the record, if you haven't noticed, and hopefully this doesn't completely ruin the podcast for you moving forward, but mine are like, and you know. And it drives me nuts, but I can't stop it. Though I do try to be more aware of it now in my day-to-day conversations because I know how much it drives me crazy. So get ready for that, should you ever decide to give it a go. And something you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are catchy and speak to me in the Notes app on my phone, and then end every podcast episode with one of those that I've noted down over the years so that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message is from the book Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, which I have mentioned before, and the message is, the person who clears the path ultimately controls its direction. So if you see that opportunity, something in the market that you're interested in trying out and doing, or you see somebody in a different industry doing something that you think you could take the rough idea of and make it your own within your own niche or your own topic or category, but you don't see anybody in your space doing that currently, and so you think that that maybe means that it's a bad thing to do or it wouldn't actually work, the person who clears the path is the one that controls its direction, so you can be that trailblazer and that one that really creates that path for the people who maybe just haven't caught up yet or haven't had this idea or haven't made that connection that it would work for them too, and you can essentially do whatever the fuck you want. It almost opens it up in a way that makes it intimidating because the possibilities are endless because you don't have that blueprint that somebody else has done already to turn to know like what to do next, how do I do this, what's the protocol. But if you're willing to bring a little bit of creativity, a little bit of bravery and strength into that project or whatever it is, you can be the one to create that path, to clear it for potentially people to follow you after who can be looking to you as an expert or somebody that is a few steps ahead of them on the path. And that could be all you need to give you the competitive advantage or to really get you and your business onto the map. So don't be afraid of being the one who clears that path. With the internet at our fingertips, it can kind of feel like everything has already been done, and maybe it has in one way or another. But again, remember that important lesson that you are uniquely you and you bring your own flair and your own style and your own perspectives and experience to everything that you do. And that is worthy and worthwhile and something that people will value. So don't shy away from those opportunities that you see. Pick up your big girl panties and just go for it and see what happens. You never know what possibilities could lie ahead. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time. Again, cheers to year one. I raise a toast to you. Thank you for being here. I love you guys, and I will catch you guys next week.